Welcome, folks, to the Squeaky Wheel, podcast number 6. My ever-attendant co-host, the president, Lawrence Gervais. My name is Ross Pambrun. I'm the captain. I happen to be a captain for the city of Calgary, and I always enjoy our opportunities, Lawrence, to engage. I know we often don't start with our guests, but I think you and I both know our very special guest today just happens to be my father, and I've brought him up in conversation before on the Squeaky Wheel. This is retired Sergeant Major George Pambrun. Dad, George, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here. And at my age, I'm glad to be anywhere.
Yeah, just to give you a little heads up on how this sort of tends to run. So Lawrence and I do tend to banter a little bit, and we would encourage you and engage you into this as well. We often start off with, we talk about coffee, try and support our local coffee communities, and definitely during this difficult time, we'll talk about some current issues, and we definitely want to engage you in those. Our Métis connections and a little bit of education. And then we talk to our guests about how to connect with us and what to expect into the future. So down there beside you, because I had the opportunity to provide it with you, is our monogram roaster coffee. And this happens to be the Moonlight Roast. So fellas, take a little sip of that. George, I gave you the Maytee mug, and I'm using, just as a little shout out to the tennis group, because last week we talked about Novak Djokovic and the challenges of the tennis world. Yes, I'm using a mug from Wimbledon. The monogram has 3 locations, in Altadore, Fifth Avenue Place in Britannia. And we're not sponsored by any of these groups, folks. We like to try and bring mention to them, support them. I think I picked this up in Britannia, and it's a very nice, it's a wonderful roast. So always encourage you to get out. So a little bit of information. I know today, I guess now being family, but being in a podcast group, how would you like me to refer to you, Dad? George, Sergeant Major, Aboriginal veteran? How would you like me to call you?
I think probably the way they always refer to me as Gramps. I don't know.
And you do have a number of grandchildren, yes. So how about we?
Well, I never talk.
Well, maybe I'll just call him Gramps, but Lawrence, you call him however you got to call him. One of the things that I know I wanted to bring up for conversation today was one of the current issues, current issue, but one of the wonderful supports that has happened within our armed forces is the Operation Laser. And thank you to our serving members. Thank you to our veterans. Thank you specifically today to our Aboriginal veterans and everybody in our Indigenous community. They saw deployments in Ontario and Quebec, and I think we're all quite familiar with the extent of the efforts. This is a brand new, seemingly kind of thing. Gramps, did you ever experience, or were you ever aware of this kind of exposure as a soldier to end up in a pandemic situation?
No, a few years back, but I was out of the military by that time. But that SARS was that's the first that I realized what they were doing in preparation. That hockey arenas and stuff like that, and that was actually I got that from my daughter-in-law, who was a nurse. And but no, I haven't been involved in that. I've been involved in deployments in that to the Middle East and also the FLQ in the 1970s.
This definitely seems like it's something that I imagine our armed forces is going to start exploring how, like any of us, to better prepare for something like this. And we might sort of come back a little bit into that conversation. Lawrence, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, because to the listeners who may not be watching on video, just as I always do, Lawrence, tell us a little bit about yourself And we're going to lead back into Gramps there.
Well, you know, my mother and father are both from Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, and I'm sure, you know, George Pambrun knows about that area because that's also where he is from. And I was just going to, you know, see what George Pambrun knew about my family and kind of put him on the spot a bit, if we can do.
So
I
you're right.
think that sounds wonderful. I guess this turns back to you, Gramps. Dad, tell us about that relationship, Meadow Lake.
Well, I was born in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, and my parents were both half breeds at that they called it that time, and my great grandparents were also half breeds, and we knew the Gervaises, and I especially knew Lawrence's granddad, of course, the brothers and the sisters, and his grandmother. But they were very dear friends to us, and they were all musical. They all played an instrument, or they sang, and from Lawrence's dad, and I found this out later, that my dad had taught his dad how to play the fiddle. So there was a lot of interaction with the families, and music was a big thing with us.
Well, it's been too long since we've been to the Meadow Lake Stampede, but I do know that the heavy hitters do end up going up to that rodeo, and I look forward to when we can finally get back to all getting together and actually spending some time watching rodeos. And I do need to make that commitment that we get back up to Meadow Lake to experience that.
You know what, Ross? I won the jigging competition up there when I was 5 years old, and I beat a 70-year-old right on their main street there by that big statue of the bronc rider statue. They had a big flatbed truck, and I remember that being a kid, and everybody clapping for me, and how wonderful it was to actually win something at that early. It's as a dancer. Little did I know I would become something else later on. But
this was your first experience was this your first win?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Congratulations. That's fantastic. In Little Meadow Lake, we're going to have to wait for the listeners to send in some pictures, hopefully regarding that win. So one of the things that I think, and I want to open up the floor to you there, Dad, is during the period of time of World War I, there was approximately 4,000 Indigenous soldiers. In World War II, the military saw about 8,000 soldiers, and there's about 1,200 serving members today that have an Indigenous background, or that's identified as an Indigenous background. I know you have a few soldiers that have a long history of having served during times of conflict. I'd like to open the floor up for you to talk a little bit about them.
Well, definitely, and I think there was very, very few families that didn't have somebody serving, either, men or women. Of all the wars, right from back to the War of 1812, the Saskatchewan Rebellion, the First World War, Second World War in Korea, there's always been a Pambrun that has been involved in the military, and also the Dealerons. In the Saskatchewan Rebellion, we had them on both sides, relatives on both sides. And what comes to mind is my cousin Ray Delarond. He fought in the Second World War and Korea, and his brother Paul was killed in Monte Cassino in Italy. So we've definitely had our involvement, and when I was in Winnipeg, posted to Winnipeg in the 70s, we knew about Tommy Prince, and Tommy Prince had fought in the Second World War. He'd fought in Korea. He was well decorated, and but he was suffering from post-traumatic stress, and he was on the streets in Winnipeg. And I often thought I'd like to go down and just talk to him, and but I never got the opportunity. And a friend of mine, a serving friend of mine at that time, Captain Don Langford, him and some other young fellow, they went down there, and they would meet him and they would talk with him, and that. So that's sort of our involvement with him. But in 1977, the year that he died, I was with the 2nd Battalion PPCLI, and we were heading to Shiloh, Manitoba for winter exercises, and the battalion got wind that Tommy had died, and the commanding officer at that time was Lieutenant Colonel Larry Gallner. Well, he left a company behind. Yeah, it's about 100 men for an honor guard. You know, and you know, I thought, you know, I was pretty proud of that. I thought, you know, that was excellent, and you know, today they're talking about putting Tommy on the $5 bill. You know, and I think that would be, you know, that would be great. And somebody else I'd like to talk about, and who is a relative. He's from the Red Pheasant Reserve, is Alex Dakota, and he left the reserve. He'd got some schooling in Saskatchewan, and he come to Edmonton, and eventually joined the Edmonton City Police. He was the first Indigenous Aboriginal person to join the police force. When the First World War broke out, well, he joined the army and went overseas. He was killed in the Second Battle of Passchendaele, I think it was. He was unfortunate, but and just to back up a bit, like he was a long distance runner, and he was well noted for that in Saskatchewan and in Alberta, and he qualified for the 1912 Olympics, and he was right up top there to you know, possibly win it, but he ended up with leg cramps, and he ended up running 6th. But you know, that's pretty awesome. And his mother, interesting enough, she was a Pambrun, Dora Pambrun. So you know, there's a connection there. And you know, there was, like I think I'd mentioned that there were many men and women that had served, and we definitely, you know, contributed, you know, to that part. So when I retired from the, well, not actually, when I got posted to Edmonton, I'd been away from home for 25 years, and I got more involved in the Indigenous community around there, and I became part of there was a movement at that time for the Aboriginal veterans, and they were called the Aboriginal Veterans Society of Alberta. and there was many that I'd met that were part of that group, and I'd just sort of like to mention their names, because these guys, you know, they were very involved in the community, the Aboriginal community, Métis Nations. Sam Sinclair was the president of Métis Nations of Alberta at that time, and had been for a few years. But there was Vic Latondra, and Bob Berard, Stan Shank, Herb Bell, Wes and Russ Whitford, Lou Goulet, and Oscar Lacombe, and Archie Hudson. You know, that's just to mention a few. That's the ones that I can remember. But I had the opportunity to serve, you know, to work with them, and to work with the society. And you know, one of our goals was to you know, reach out to the veterans, and that, especially the ones that weren't around, you know, close to Edmonton, you know, concerned about their welfare, their health, housing, and benefits. And it was very stressful for the ones that were, you know, say, you know, living out of Edmonton, you know, High Prairie and Slave Lake and places like that, to come into Edmonton. It was stressful. So when they get in there, and then you have to go right down to Jasper and on 97th Street. So what we did was we organized, they'd come into a central place, and we'd have somebody pick them up and take them down to Veterans Affairs and to the offices, and accompany them through that. So that was one of the accomplishments of that, and it still exists today. That society.
I think within a lot of the Métis community, there's still a lot of programs that are going to open and continue that dialogue, both with in all aspects of different challenges that people face. But I think as a soldier, though you may have retired, you were still serving when you spent your time on that committee or that organization, because you were still supporting people. Lawrence, can you talk a little bit about, because I'm not as familiar with it, the Métis Veterans Legacy Fund?
Yeah, so the Métis National Council, I think they got $30 million to in a very large trust to assist Métis veterans. And I know they just had a launch of their phase 2, which is inclusive of spouses of World War II veterans. And I know me and George and Audrey Putra were here at an event honoring John Putra. Just, you know, I kind of wanted to see George's sort of thoughts on where that is headed. They currently are funding, they found, I think, 23 veterans that they each allotted $20,000 for. And phase 2 is now working on getting money to the spouses of the ones who passed away. So I think they're working towards getting a little bit more money and a little more footing into the Métis veteran community. So, and I know I say Métis veteran community because they're a part of the national scale here. So there's probably hundreds of them that we don't know. So how do we get them more involved?
Well, there used to be a national body, but that fell through the cracks a few years ago. They still have a small membership, but you know, I can't tell you any more than what you said there, Lawrence. Because at first that I'd heard of it, that it was for Second World War vets. It didn't include Korean vets. So there is a second phase, and
yeah, Yeah, and I do believe they'll be opening up the door for a lot more. I mean, that's what's going to happen eventually, right? Because obviously it's set in a trust, and they have to work on this stage to get to this stage,
Right.
and vets will be next, and further on.
Yeah, and that does make sense. Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely glad that they're proceeding, but I haven't been involved involved with them, since I moved down here. At one time, Calgary had a group of veterans, Indigenous veterans down here, but it became defunct. So there's only one other veteran that I get together with, and he's from the Siksika, Clarence Wolfleg. So him and I get together, but
well, maybe it's time for Canada to move forward on assisting at least an association or some type of representation for Indigenous veterans across Canada, to look at that sort of model. And how do you support? Well, this is one way. Support an association that represents our veterans and takes care of them, and I think that's important. Us as a government, we don't want to sit there and rely too heavily on us to decide. Once we get a trust, where it actually goes, it should go to the veterans themselves right away. So they should be the ones coordinating those agreements, and having the Minister of Veterans and all them supporting that too. That's part of that process.
yes, there definitely is that requirement, and they do have some ombudsmans and stuff like that. But again, I'm not.
Is that the Prime Minister?
Yeah,
That's asking them for your input right now. That's what should happen.
he's trying to interrupt right here now. Yeah, so I guess they have to get a group together. I was talking with a friend of mine, Claude Pettit. He used to be president of the national body, and he said that there wasn't any veterans that were invited to that table when they first came up with that. And that's what he told me, because he went there, and as you probably know, when we had the national body, I was vice president at that time, and Claude was president, and we had a monument built and erected in Ottawa, a very prestigious, a very fine monument right across from the Elgin Hotel in that park. So when that $30 million was given to the Métis Nations there, I think it was in Manitoba, that he went there to see if he could. We need to finish it. We need to get some lights on it, and he'd approached them to see if he could, get, a few $1,000s to finish that monument, and he hasn't heard anything since then. But they also, at that time we had a scholarship fund. It was $1 million for education. And so that's another thing that, Indigenous students that want to go on to, secondary education, there is some funding there. And so those are some of the things that have come out of these societies or associations and that. Also, I think another was the Bold Eagle program, which it's all Indigenous students, and it's held in Wainwright pretty well in July. I think it's a 6-week program. I've been to the graduations in that. It was canceled for this year because of COVID-19, but there's also one on the West Coast, Raven, and that's sort of around the Navy, and then there's one in I think there's one in Quebec. I'm not sure about that one, but so things are definitely improving, that way. So
Yeah, I know there's one aspect that we kind of left out in the memorial at Batoche that's been set up for the Métis veterans, and I know you let me carry a flag in for you that one day when you're just a little bit tired and needed me to assist, and I thank you for that. I just didn't realize I'd be on stage with the other veterans, and I had to mosey my way out. But what is the importance of having that Batoche Memorial for those Métis veterans specific?
well, I think for a long time, they were ignored, as it's been the Métis nations and that have brought that to light, and of course the veterans that have got together, like the association, the Alberta Veteran Society of Alberta, that, and also like Saskatchewan, between Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba, we've got, we've served together, we're friends, and although we're from different provinces and that, but Batoche sort of seems to be, the center of our homeland, of the prairies, and that's paying the due, the respect that those soldiers did participate, and today, they're recognized as a distinct society, and that's important.
Do you recognize a lot of those names that are on the monument?
I sure do. Yeah, my cousin and some other friends there from Meadow Lake. Ronnie Collins comes to mind right there, and there's an Obashan that that's all the names that I can recall right now. But there was a great representation there, from Meadow Lake and from and from Saskatchewan and Alberta also. But it's a it's a place of honor, and people want to go there. They want to go back. It's and hopefully that it's going to continue, and and be able to build on that.
And it's a great piece of our our opening ceremonies there, to have the grand entry begin there and end up on the big stage, and having to walk all the way through all those people to get there. It's really a fantastic arrangement that we have at Batoche. So I encourage everybody to go there and take a look.
Well, especially they got all the names on there now, or not all of them, but the majority of them, and that's definitely a positive aspect of. I'm proud of that. Yeah.
The just to keep our conversation moving along, little fellas, I just want to say thank you to all of our subscribers. Thank you to all the people who listen to us. When you have questions or you hear conversation and you have a question, please write it down. Make sure you email us at tsw@maytee3.org. Look up our website at maytee3.org. And these are your opportunities. Lawrence and I often go into a bit of a rant. And I know there was a couple things that we had originally talked about. I mentioned to you some of the challenges within COVID, some of the challenges, some of the exciting things like the Grey Eagles bringing up outdoor concert viewing that you drive your vehicle to. So folks, make sure you look those things up. This is sort of the new norm. We're trying to, groups are trying to develop some new opportunities. But instead of our usual rant, or instead of this, I think maybe we just have a short dialogue, and George, maybe you help us understand a little bit and the confusion. And we're not going to answer it. We're not trying to answer it, but the conversation about systemic racism, and it's different for everybody. It's a challenge. It's confusing. Where does it begin? Where does it end? But what is it? What did it mean to you? What does it mean to you?
Well, like I mentioned at first, I was born and raised in Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan, and I knew that there was something different. There was, and it would be racism. Long before I knew what the word was, I knew that there was prejudice and discrimination, and we didn't have to self-identify as indigenous people, because there was the breeds. They lived in one part, and right next to them was the reserve, and a lot of our relatives, the breeds and that they call First Nations here today, were related. And the area that we lived in, it was called Little Chicago, Moccasin Flats, and Moccasin Flats. Well, the whole area was jokingly referred to as Bare Ass Town, because the women in the summertime used to let their babies run naked so they could get the sun on their bottoms. So, but yeah, I've known about it long, like I said, long before I ever knew what the hell the word was. But I joined the Army, and we were focused on learning how to be a soldier, working as a team, and you became comrades and friends because of they earned their respect because they did their work and did what they were told. And so it didn't matter what race you were. It depended on how you became and become part of that team. And I can say, through my whole career, there's going to be racism. You're never going to wipe it out. You're going to minimize it, recognize it, and how you deal with it, personally, is a big thing. I mean, so I talked to two friends. One that I just made contact with him here, but I've known him for years. And he's originally from, his family's from the Siksika Reserve. And he spent 30 some odd years in the military. He was a major. He ended up as a major. Another friend of mine, Don Langford, he spent 30 some odd years. He became a captain. And I've talked to them and I said, did you ever experience any of this? And there might be the odd time, but that's not what, that's not, I can't believe what they're saying, that it's systemic through the, maybe it is today.
Yeah. And I guess not to get, too far into it, because again, at that level, it might be very confusing. And if it's confusing for them at that level, it's even confusing for us at this level. I think it's important that, we continue to have dialogue. We continue to open up the conversation and recognize it. But your approach to it sounds grounded. And I think that's just something I just wanted to ask, and we only have so much time on our show. And we tend to be a very positive show of always looking for the, positive conversation. But also there are times where, you know, there are delicate subjects that we need to talk about. So Lawrence, do you have anything you'd like to sort of throw out there for closing?
You know, I think, you know, Mr. Pambrun, I guess I can call him that now. I usually call him Georgie. But I think in this time, you know, I really want to address that his service for Canada. I think that's important that we address that and acknowledge it, reward it. And, you know, I always look up to Mr. Pambrun in my life as a mentor and even knowing what my history is. And I always remember my first real meeting with George was at the Legion, and he handed me an envelope, and I thought it was some secret mission, but he had a picture of my dad and my uncle and in his bedroom the day he left for the army. So I knew there was a connection there, and there's been one ever since. So he's even signed my oath of office, and I was very grateful for him to do that for me. And I do follow him around, and people always presume that he's my dad because I'm always serving him coffee or giving him food or wiping his mouth after he's done eating.
Do that for me too, though.
But no, George is a very big picture in my life, and he's the one who introduced me to Ross. So I'm very grateful for that, and I want to thank him for his service, and I'm sure everybody feels the same way.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
And yeah, so I'd like to do a shout out again just to Monogram, and thank you for our opportunity to share in your coffee. Thank you to the tradition for our traditional lands and the use of it. Thank you to our connection with Mother Earth and the Métis settlement land. Thank you to our seniors, our elders, our families. Thank you always to my co-host, the president, Lawrence Gervais. And folks, make sure you try or continue to subscribe. Please continue to send us your positive comments. If you have any negative comments, send those directly to Lawrence. And thank you again, Dad, for sitting in on us. You may not have noticed I'm wearing your Huskies jacket that you picked up over in Germany in the 60s. And I just wanted to do a little shout out. Thank you to all of our members in the armed forces and the military who have served, who are veterans, and continuing to work to make our country safe. So with that, folks, I'm going to sign off the Squeaky Wheel, and we look forward to you engaging with us in the coming weeks. Thanks, fellas.
Keep